Today I'm going to take the 7 sheets plus scraps that were left in this watermelon themed 6x6 pad, along with some of my no scrap sketch sets, and turn those papers into 14 cards with no scraps left over. Hey, it's Beth, welcome. Today is a Smash Those Small Pads collaboration, and I am going to be working on finishing off It's a Fresh Summer pad from the Not Too Shabby shop. I only have about 7 full sheets left plus some scraps. So I pulled out some of my no scraps sketch set for 6x6 papers, and we'll be using these. I've got 1, 12, and then 13. And so I figure I will be making at least 14 cards. Depending on the scraps, there might be a little bit more. So I thought I would go ahead and finish off this pad with you all today and just continue on with my watermelon vibes.
The Smash Those Small Pads collaboration is just a small collab I do with my friend Sarah, who's crafting and relaxing here on YouTube, and Kathy, who is Stampin' Cat over on Instagram. And each month we just choose a pad smaller than 12 by 12 and work on finishing it off. The first thing I did here was take my sketch sets and figure out which papers I wanted to use for which set. I kind of based that on the size of the pieces on the cards, whether I need tinier print or I can work with a larger print, such as this watermelon heart print. And then also I want to make sure that if I need more than one pattern, that I don't end up with like all of the same patterns left at the very end. So that is kind of why I do pre-plan that, and you will have seen me do that in other videos where I use either sketch sets or templates from other people. It's just kind of a way for me to make sure that I don't end up with all of the same patterns at the end or patterns that don't work as well together. So I don't plan anything out for sketch set 1 yet. I just did that for sketch sets 12 and 13. Sketch set 1 is a great one to use with scraps. So I'm going to save that one and see what I have left at the end, and then we'll work on that sketch. So I'm just going to kind of let you follow along with my process. If this is something that you enjoy, I will have the sketch sets linked for you in the description box below. They'll take you to my website. You can download them completely for free. And then if you like the thought of planning and using something like this to help you work through a paper pad, I also have a workbook that is for a 6x6 paper pad that with 24 sheets, and the guide gives you the cutting guides and sketch sets and all the information you need to help you take a 6x6 pad, use it up, and turn it into 40 cards. So that is a purchased workbook, so I will have, or a purchasable workbook, so I will have that linked in the description box below for you as well. But if that's something that you enjoy, you can check that out. I have a video that kind of goes through that and my process for that as well. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy, and Kathy and Sarah will also be linked in the description box so you can see what small pads they made or used this month. But I'm going to get to crafting and hope you guys craft along with me.
14 cards that I made using the last 7 sheets plus scrap of the It's a Fresh Summer. And I did use some of my no scraps sketch sets, and then the not too shabby watermelon pet tape to make these fun summery watermelon vibe cards. Hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure again to check out the links to Sarah and Kathy in the description box below. As always, I thank you so much for your time and hope you all have a very crafty day.